Hey there, podcast listeners. Exciting news. My new audiobook, The Short Book Formula, a financial professional's guide to writing a book in 6 weeks to attract ideal clients, is out now. And the best part, for a limited time, we're offering this audiobook to you for free. Hurry over to www.theshortbookformula.com and claim your copy now. And now, on to our show. Hey everyone, this is Paul McManus, the host of the $1 Million Producer Show, and I am here today with Tim Mitrovich. Tim is the CEO at 10 Capital Wealth Advisors based out of Spokane, Washington. And what really fascinated me about having this interview with Tim is that he is a thought leader on the future of all the trends of where wealth management's going. And to back that up in terms of his credibility, Tim has taken his company from roughly $80 million of assets under management when he started 8 years ago to today having over $800 million of assets under management. So I'm really excited to jump into this conversation. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Now, just kind of to start out very generally for someone that's not familiar with you or your firm, what is it when we say wealth management? What is it that you do? What is it that you specialize in? Who are your typical clients? What's your company all about?
Yeah. I think we were one of the early adopters of really two things: making sure that we were planning centric, that our agendas for clients were not based off some canned approach, but really sitting down with clients, listening to them. It sounds like a tagline, but it really was the truth that we would say. The difference between us and so many people is we don't know what we're going to do for you when we first sit down, which sounds like a kind of simple statement, but I know you know the industry well. A lot of times, client sits down, talks at length, and the advisor says, "Great, I'm going to put you in this," which is the same thing they've done 1,000 times, or is based more on their comp model than anything that the client said. And so that was step one. The other thing that we said again was we really wanted, as a guiding post for the firm, to try to make what we view to be a very impersonal industry personal again, and bringing those two things together. Again, just as kind of general guidelines, has really shaped so much of what we've done, both in terms of the nature of client interactions in the office, plenty of client events outside of the office, and again, deepening those relationships in a way that not just creates clients, but really advocates and fans of our firm.
Absolutely. Now, I know a lot of people talk about some of the things that you just said. So a lot of people talk about client relationships, putting clients first, and the reality might be a little bit different, or might be a little bit more generic. What is it that you guys are doing specifically to really build those client relationships and to demonstrate to the clients how you're invested in them?
A lot of it's just time. I think it's a business, again, that has been predicated on trying to move people in and through. So, we won't just take on new clients. I think we've taken to heart a lot of the different practice management pieces that are out there. Let me start here. We don't think we're special. And so when you don't think you're special, you pay attention to those people who've come before, you listen, you learn, you're more willing to adapt. And so I think that, far from thinking we have it all figured out, a lot of our success, I think, comes from approaching things in a pretty humble fashion. Okay. So one of the things, again, that we've heard is make sure you're really working for people you're passionate about too. Have the self-discipline to not just take anybody on. Sure. Our typical client is an average household, has $1 million, but it really ranges in part on our advisors, where they're at in their careers. Obviously, some of our younger advisors are willing to take on smaller accounts with young professionals growing, but we'll meet upwards of 1 or 2 times with the client, just helping unpack really what is important to them and how they might accomplish that, to get a feel, each one of us, for working together, and then decide, this isn't going to be a great fit. Now, it is for most people, but there are times where, they don't think they need our value or don't perceive there to be enough value there, or conversely, we just don't think it's someone that we're going to be able to have a great relationship with. Again, not that they're not great people, but we've all dealt with this in our personal lives, right? You can have two great people who just aren't great together. And
Sure.
So I think that step one is being willing to spend the time to demonstrate your value up front, be genuine about seeing if there's a good fit. And then it just becomes a lot of time, Paul. I think, I always harken back to Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, where we all kind of know the things we should do, but knowing them and doing them are different. And so I don't know how many things we do that are radically unique. I think the thing that's radical about it is our consistency. So we put out a weekly hand-done commentary, both in video and written form. We throw 26 different client events, ranging from very small personal events to some very large social gatherings. And I think it's that consistency of putting in that hard work. Mentioned in David and Goliath. I mean, he talked about it with running the press at Louisville with Calipari, I believe it was, or Patino, excuse me, and just how hard they worked. That was the secret. And a lot of people walked away saying, I just don't want to work that hard. And so I think, again, that's really the secret sauce to what we have going here is the character of our people and their willingness to put the time in.
Sure. Yeah, no, what you're saying, I think, is you're talking about execution. I think nowadays, especially with all the things that are possible for people to do, especially when it comes to marketing and different things, there's a lot of bright, shiny object syndrome, meaning that there's 10 different things that potentially someone could do, and they might be okay. But if you're just chasing the next idea, are you really owning it and executing? So what it sounds like you're saying is that it's a number of core things that you've seen work, and it's just the consistency of execution over time that really creates results that you're producing.
Absolutely. I mean, I was down at the TD Elite conference, not that I didn't meet a lot of great people and learn as well down there, but I remember talking to some people who had indicated to our common rep that, how are we going to grow? We just don't know. We've tried to do this, that, whatever. We've tried client events, I guess must have come up because she's like, oh, you've got to meet Tim and hear how they're communicating with clients and these different client events they're doing. And you'd listen to them like, I put out a newsletter like for a month, or we've done like 3 client events.
Yep.
I mean, to be clear, like we stunk at a lot of this stuff for a really long time, and we still may not be very good. We're just better than we were, right? Sure. But it is that consistency of keep going on. And again, not doing an event or putting something out because it's about what you want to say so much as it is what that they want to hear, right? And so when we do anything, we're always asking ourselves, not what is our agenda, but if we were on the other side of this, would we want to come to this party?
Sure. Exactly.
Would I just take time of my Friday afternoon to read is this going to help me, or is this just out to help 10 Capital? And so, but that takes a lot of time because it doesn't, I get the question all the time, what do you think your return on time or equity but I think if that's your focus, you're probably going to get frustrated before whatever payoff is going to comes.
Sure. Now, I've heard, I was actually checking out some of your videos and social media before this interview, and I've heard you talking a lot about a team approach.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what that means to you.
Sure. Well, again, not to pick on my fellow listeners here, but I think I had to face this truth myself some years ago, which is for being in an industry where we tell clients they need a partner, being an industry that tells people to take a long-term perspective. There are a whole lot of us who work in isolation without any partners and who are very short-term in our approaches. And so for me, when I think about team, part of doing anything we do here, from great planning to portfolio design to even a client event, is having a lot of different skill sets, personalities that the clients get to engage with, right? Sure. Or that might be able to hear something a client's saying and come up with a more constructive answer. We've all been in those situations where, let's hypothetically say you and I are talking to, Mr. Client, and I say something, he's like, I just don't understand. And then you say the exact same thing, I think. And he's like, oh, I understand it when Paul says it. Yeah. And like, that's what I just said, right? And so, but it's just a little bit different. And that difference can be the key. But that difference can only come when you have, again, people who are certainly linked through a common philosophy and core set of values, but just are different people and have different approaches. So for us, we've got people who really gravitate toward any different aspect of the business, but we can rely on each other's strengths and weaknesses, both personally and professionally, to, I think, again, give a more well-rounded experience to the clients.
That's awesome. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that's very important to me, and I believe it's important to you, is the idea of thought leadership.
Yeah.
And also using today's, content marketing, social media, et cetera, to put out that thought leadership. I know that you do a lot of videos. Tell me what your, in terms of thought leadership, where do you stand, or what are the things that are most important to you, and what are the trends going forward that you're looking to really shape or to be shape that conversation?
Yeah, it's I never wanted to make the videos.
Okay.
And I say that because I think it's an important truth of life that the right thing to do is often very counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely have I made the decisions where I'm like, oh, this is absolutely the right path through. I was probably oblivious to a lot, and those have usually backfired. Were the things that took a leap of faith, caused me some hesitancy, we're going to create some type of discomfort, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Really the path to go. And so I think for me, that's all just to say, it wasn't that I felt that my voice had to be heard, or and pretty quickly I realized I had to let go of the pressure of trying to say something or be something profound. I think it just had to be out there. I think we sometimes realize that there's just not a lot of positive thought. There are not a lot of people who may be articulating something that's a very simple message. And that again, to my earlier point, where you and I are talking to a hypothetical client, that your voice may not say anything different, but it may say it differently. Mm-hmm. And that is the difference to resonating with someone. And so for us, it was, again, for our clients, for the investor community, or, investment advisor community, just walking the talk, rather than just saying that everything else stinks. Like trying to put something out there and hoping that people would respect the heart and the effort with which it was done, even if the content wasn't always what it could or should be. But no, I do think the industry is changing. I think people who aren't willing to do the hard things or the uncomfortable things, step back in an ego to work within a team construct, as you just alluded to, and are instead focused on their payouts and their profitability and all these things that, in my experience, actually choke off growth, even up until this point. They're not going to be ready for what's next, because what's next is going to certainly be, in some part, about scale. You're going to have to deliver more than you've ever delivered before to clients. But part of that, again, is only really possible working within a team construct, because no one of us has all those traits and talents that are going to be able to suffice for what clients need.
Sure. Tell me a little bit more about, I understand that I think you have about 10, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 10 financial advisors that are part of your team. Is that accurate?
10 licensed, probably 6 to 7 of us that are really focused on client engagement.
Okay, perfect.
In terms of classic advisors, yeah.
Sure. So when it comes to branding and thought leadership, help me understand the difference, if there is one, between what you do as the CEO and how your financial advisors that are involved in client engagement attraction, do they have their own personal brands that are separate? Do they leverage what you put out? What does that look like? And part of the reason for that, the question, is that one of the things that I see for many advisors out there, especially ones that work, for, or even independent ones, they're bought into some, program, some company, and all of the marketing becomes very generic. It's all very generic. And so it's hard, so they typically don't stand out as an authentic, unique individual.
Right.
If that question makes sense, how is it different, not just for you, but for your team in terms of how you approach content and marketing?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the hardest, let me start here from the place that people have got to get to is understanding that on the same point, the lone wolves or 2-person shops, I believe, will die in short order, right? Unless they have some hyper-specific niche that, let's be frank, very few advisors truly have. And some very obviously high net worth clients. On the flip side, there are a lot of mega RIAs now that are just basically wirehouses and sheep's clothing. And I don't really think that creates that canned experience that you're talking about, where you're really rolling up under, whether it's a brand or a personality, that person's approach. On the one hand, I think anybody who's sitting in the chair in which I sit needs to be constantly crafting narratives and messages,
Sure.
and playing that role. I capped how many clients I'll work with, because obviously I need to be a manager as well.
Sure.
And help with that. But at the same time, I don't view that simply as being about myself or the firm, but going to the individual advisors and helping them, to your point, craft their own message. And so if you go back through our LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook feeds, you'll see other people will do some of the commentaries as well. Other people are part of what we call our weekly 10, which is kind of our 1 to 2 minute Instagram type video. And so it isn't just meant to be my show. It really is about the team. But they don't have that pressure to feel the need to say something if there's nothing that they have to say.
Yeah,
we're taking it a step further. We're certainly looking to add other great advisors to our team, whether they're here in Spokane or regionally for that matter. And part of our value proposition is going to be both with resources as well as with messaging, helping them craft their own personal brands within the context, again, of the team. Because I do believe clients love that team concept. Our team has certainly found it here that it only strengthens our individual values to our clients that we have great colleagues. It doesn't detract because I've got a colleague with a talent that I don't have. It only adds to my story. And so, again, it is helping you stand out, whatever your unique story is. But within that context, that fabric of the entire team, and helping us build, helping you build yourself up, because you're also surrounded by a bunch of other great people. So.
Switching gears again, aside from client relations per se, thinking about trends and how the industry is evolving and what's next, and how do you not just survive but potentially thrive in the coming years? What role does technology play? What role do you see technology playing, whether it's meeting remotely like we are today? I mean, right now we're in the middle of the coronavirus as we're interviewing this, and there's this concept of social distancing, right? So it's like, how do you build your business when you have to stay 6 feet away from people? That's a momentary thing, but longer term, what are you seeing in terms of technology and how to leverage technology to attract more clients, to create those better relationships, whether they're local or remote?
I mean, part of it's things like this, right? The ability to have clients that aren't going to come down to your office, or to be able to facilitate a meeting with two busy spouses who can't be at the same place at the same time. I mean, that's certainly part of the modern reality. And for the most part, I think that's pretty easily solved. I think I look at technology and our use of it moving forward. Again, coming back to one of those guiding principles I talked about, which is how are we going to make an impersonal industry personal? And so if I've sat down, with a couple, and one of them has articulated to me some things that are just paramount to them, goals. I want more time with my family. There's a trip we take every year as a family that, it would kill me to not be able to take with my kids, et cetera. How do I craft my messaging specific to that? And then do that at scale, right? We all have finite memories. So how am I going to be able to create that unique? So for us, technology, certainly about being on their phone, so to speak, with a great app, but communicating regularly. So whether that's trade alerts and portfolio updates that are popping up as notifications on your phone in general, to something very specific like, hey, Paul, I know this is the day where now you're able to accomplish that. We remembered it, and we're reaching out to just say we're excited as well. Those little personal touches, I think, will be the critical difference between those who succeed moving forward and not. And again, it's not any one of those things so much as it is just how you're going to make people have a high degree of confidence that their personal story and their goals. I think the biggest thing I hear from new clients that come on about why they're leaving wherever they were at is they just didn't feel heard or remembered. So those are two things we want to make sure we're addressing.
Sure. Very cool. In terms of marketing and business development, you've talked a lot about client relationships. what is it that your firm does to, I mean, what has clients reaching out to you aside from referrals?
Yeah.
What is it that you guys are invested in terms of marketing or business development
Yeah.
that you see working the best? And by the same token, what have you tried or done over the past 8 years that, just is like, oh my goodness, that did not work whatsoever. Let's stay away from that.
Yeah. I think, we haven't had a lot of success with like buying leads and some of those things, or again, more of those classic approaches. I wouldn't say it's that our phones are ringing off the hook with people who had otherwise not heard of us, but then saw this Instagram video that changed the world. I think it's everything in totality. I had a 8-figure account come over last year, and they were referred,
Okay.
but they were referred by someone who had been brought by somebody else to one of our client events, social events.
Sure.
And when this person mentioned to the new client, that they should be a client, they started looking around on Facebook and Instagram and seeing some of the videos and getting a feel for who we are. And like,
Definitely.
yeah, I think I will call them. They're nice guys. So
Definitely.
It wasn't just the event. It wasn't just a referral. It wasn't just the Instagram video. But as I asked, as we always do with clients, like what led you? Thank you for deciding to work with us. What led to that? To paraphrase, he mentioned a whole bunch of different things. And so here again, for those people who get too focused on their return on investment in any one area, I think they'll be disappointed, but it's the totality of all of that. I think the short answer to your question though is, how are you going to facilitate the referral? Not just ask.
Yep.
So we all have had people who have said, oh man, you got to meet my buddy Joe. He'd be a great client for you. I know he needs to work with somebody. But people in our line of work sometimes forget what a huge risk it is for a referral, or how intimidating or nauseating it is to sit down with people who, again, are coming with an agenda. But if I can put something fun together, like we hold a March Madness event, not this year, clearly, 350 plus people show up. And we never have sold at an event ever. There's no sales pitches. There's no, this is why 10 Capital is great. There's no, let us tell you about a magic portfolio. None of that nonsense. We literally just try to bring value and a good time. Now you can feel safe bringing Joe to that event, and you can promise Joe, hey, look, come get a feel for these guys. They're good people. I've been trying to get you in front of Tim. I promise they're not going to corner you and try to get a statement out of you before you leave. And now we're going, right? So that a natural relationship can start to build that is just going to set the stage for what then could become a referral. And so referrals, obviously the common word, but it's all the things you have to do to lead up to that.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you, and I totally agree. And there's a number of really, I think, powerful things that you said there. Let me just dissect a few things that I heard.
Sure.
One is that event, right? So, that was the opening, that the event in and of itself did not, convert the client, if you will. It was the opening. Right. They became aware of you. But then what I heard you say is that then the person was curious, there was no pressure to do anything, but they're curious like we all are, and as we all do nowadays, we go online, we check companies out, we check people out. And the more social proof, the more content, good content, ideally, that you have out there in the marketplace, especially when it's, video or audio or podcasts, it gives people the ability to get to know you, your personality, your trustworthiness, your credibility, before they ever feel, that need to, there's a process there that people go through. There's a psychological process. The other thing that you said that I love, and I actually just did this yesterday, was that, how do you facilitate the referral? So being referral is not something new. It's like that's that we love referrals, and it's not something new. But it's completely different if I were to email someone and say, hey, you should talk to Tim. He's a wealth advisor. You should talk to him. Versus sending a link to a podcast that you're on about some specific topic that I know is of value or importance to the person I'm introducing you to, and say, hey, I know this is important. I want to introduce you to Tim. Here's a podcast that he was just on. If you find it valuable, feel free to reach out. That is a
Yep.
night and day difference, because it gives the
Totally.
person a chance to kind of vet you, get a sense of you before they decide to reach out.
You can only call so many people at one point in time, whether they're clients or prospects. And so this month, if it doesn't set the record for new assets at the firm, it's going to come close.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had our hands as full as anybody. And a lot of it has come, as you're mentioning, putting out those commentaries, and your hypothetical buddy Joe that we're using right now, that you can say, you're talking with him as you would in an ordinary course of a relationship, and he's, oh my God, Paul, what am I going to do? This is happening. And you'd be like, well, hey, let me forward you the commentary that my guy just sent over to me. I think I've mentioned Tim to you before. And, he's struck a pretty optimistic tone. He had some different thoughts, and you can ping him. You're like, yeah, you know what, that guy, maybe I could use having a relationship like that. He sees how calm you were. I had a client the other day tell me they were at a bridge. It was a lady who's like, I was at a bridge, and half the clients, as fate would have it, were 10 Capital clients and half weren't. And I just put out kind of an intro week. It was during one of the crashes a week or two ago, a piece that I wanted, and they had all got it on their phones and taken a quick look at it. And she was just talking about the conversation that then transpired during this bridge meeting, where the 5 clients thought it was so cool that they had gotten an interweek message, that they got it on their phone, that it helped them know that things were going to be okay. And now they're talking at this bridge event to these other 5 ladies, who, to my knowledge, haven't called yet, but hopefully they might, about, hey, this is what's going on. And none of them had that, right?
Yep.
And so we'll joke, you got to do the right things. But, I hearken back. I'm old enough, as I think you are too, Paul, to remember the movie Jerry Maguire.
Sure.
And I talk at colleges. The kids have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm like, you got to go back and watch that movie. But it's the scene at the end, where the agent says, they're hugging because of everything that they, Tidwell and Maguire's character have gone through. And the guy looks over at his age, like, how come we don't have a relationship like that? And so, again, we all love the end of that story if it results in a new client relationship, but there's so much that has to go into it for you to earn that right to have that relationship that then is attractive to another person.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And from my experience, what I find is that, the thought leadership, the content, the willingness to put yourself out there, it simply accelerates that process. Because once you get the phone call from whether it's a referral or a completely quote unquote cold prospect that's, just found you online, they already have a sense of who you are. There's already a level of trust, and it's just easy to hit the ground running.
Well, I had one guy knew it was a referral. He had gone to the website. He's like, on the one hand, I thought, this guy must be pretty cocky if he's putting out a video every week. But he goes, ultimately, I was like, whoever I'm giving my money to, I want him to be confident, right? So I think you got to strike that right tone. But here again, that's not something I'm able to do on my own. The team certainly steps forward and quite literally does a lot of those. They certainly help facilitate a lot of the events. They'll send me material that maybe they don't want to be the presenter of, but is great material. Again, we wouldn't pretend that everything that we're doing is our own thought. There are a lot of brilliant men and women in our industry. And so a lot of times you're just finding those nuggets and sharing them. And so, again, I think that's part of both the humility and then the lack of putting pressure on yourself to realize sometimes all you just need to be is the messenger. And in Diego, he had this to say. I think it can be helpful to you, and not, again, whether it's quite literally the team internally to your firm or a bigger external team in terms of the industry, a feeling that other people's talents have to detract from your value proposition, right? And I run into that so much, where people think of it, they want to hoard everything into themselves, and they're afraid if they open it up at all, that it somehow diminishes them, which is not the case.
Sure. In a moment, I'm going to ask you about how an advisor, if they're listening to this and they're interested, how they can reach out to you.
Sure.
Before we do that, is there any question that I haven't asked you yet that you think would be important for us to discuss?
I don't think so. I guess if there's one thing to everything we've just been discussing that I would finish on is, you can start small. I think sometimes, again, at least in those conversations where I've been introduced to other people in the industry at conferences, et cetera, who wanted to know how we're doing what we're doing. This is 8 years in the making of building, and we weren't doing everything we do today 8 years ago. And it's what, again, is things that we can facilitate because it feels authentic to us. Because I think that's, at the end of the day, it's that authenticity that people are going to feel, right? Our commentaries have typos in them. Our events have mistakes. But I think the heart and the effort, again, that we put into those is palpable, and people feel that. And so, we all have different unique interests, things that we feel capable. And so I think that's where anybody can start.
Very cool. And so it's my understanding that that you're open to, I mean, you're not recruiting per se, but you're open to bringing on new advisors if appropriate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so for an advisor listening to this, what are some of those things that they should be thinking about, questions that they have in terms of potentially reaching out to you?
Yeah. I think if someone at some point, case in point, this latest advisor is going to be joining and pushing us to that 800 million mark. Great talent, great business, a huge book of business, but found that, again, working in isolation, relatively speaking, things had stagnated, most notably growth, innovation, just from a lack of time. And again, even peer groups to sharpen one another off of. And so I think if someone out there is saying, look, I'm either struggling to grow, or I've kind of hit the ceiling, or I'm just not enjoying my job enough, I think people don't realize how often what has become routine and thus passionless comes off to clients and prospects. They sense you're going through the motions.
Sure.
And so that's, again, a great advantage of having colleagues. I think if anybody has found themselves in that way, they should reach out. They don't have to feel like they want to join 10 Capital. We certainly would love to grow. Like I said, I do think scale is important for us all. But by the same token, as I think I might have mentioned to you in a previous conversation, I don't view my greatest competitors as being other men and women who are doing it well. I view it as all those people who are not doing it well. And so if I can share something that helps somebody else improve their practice, not just prospecting, but their practice and how they do things, that's great. Because I think our industry has a reputational problem that is a greater impediment to success than somebody else being good at their job, right? Sure. And so I'm happy to share. And I also learn a lot. Sure. Again, we might have put our own stamp on a lot of these ideas, but we're not pretending that we're the first ones to originate the idea of a client event. We just, have done it in some unique ways that I think have made it more productive.
Is there a minimum book of business that an advisor would need to potentially join a firm like yours, or to join actually your firm?
Yeah. To be honest, we look at that a lot like we do clients, in the sense of really how young are they? If we find someone who has a $25 to $50 million book of business, who's a young advisor who's just getting going and we think has a lot of potential, that's a much different conversation than trying to go, buy a $25 million book of a 65-year-old guy that's got 300 clients in it, right? And so I think what I'd say is, we're open to conversations, even if it's just to be helpful. I've had some people reach out in the past under the guise of wanting to join, just trying to pilfer information. I'm like, I would have willingly shared that with you, right? Like you didn't have to pretend you were joining my firm for me to help give you a piece of advice, or just again, not even that I'm necessarily coming from some place, above or below anyone else, but just to have a conversation with a peer. Again, there's a lot of times in our industry where, much like I talked about some of the things that create hesitancies of quoting another expert in the industry, or saying, that's really not my expertise, that's my teammates' expertise. We just don't share enough. And so I think one of the things, if I can help facilitate it, is just that willingness to, again, like, let's all get better at our craft and learn from one another. And there's plenty of clients and plenty of business and plenty of opportunity for those people who want to do it right.
Very cool. Final question. So, we joked earlier about there's a lot of eights in your numbers. So you've been in business for 8 years. You started with 80 million. You're currently around 800 million. So 8 years from now, we're in 2028. What does 10 Capital Wealth Advisors look like?
I do think we'll, begin to have a regional / West Coast presence. I started to say this earlier. I don't think becoming monolithic is in anybody's best interest. So when I talk about geographical spread, it's more about probably what it takes to find the people who are the right fit for our firm than it is trying to become the next big brand that's flying around. I think the biggest thing for us is going to be I think the next thing is how we rethink the office space, to be honest, Paul. Maybe it's a conversation for another day, but helping take some of what we're doing in terms of the types of meetings we hold, the client events we have, and bringing those things together into a really unique experience within our office. So I think a couple of years ago we decided, like, are we going to just become the people who do everything via go-to meetings and shrink our office space as much as humanly possible, or do we really rethink how office space is used and what it's there for, and how it can be used to build client and community engagement? So 8 years from now, I hope we've accomplished that. And to the extent we've been able to put out more good content that's helped improve the industry, that would be a great blessing as well.
Very cool. Well, Tim, thank you very much for being our guest on today's episode of the $1 Million Producer Show. We appreciate having you.
Thank you, Paul.